And good almost afternoon, everyone. I think you're seeing me, and the video is a little bit jerky because it's eating up bandwidth. But
So type in
hello and
because
welcome to
you-
our seminar. If you could type in the chat, whether you're hearing me or not, want to make sure that we are audible. If you could just type in, can you hear me? I'm going to type in. You see me. Hi, Bikini.
How are you?
Can you see us, Bikini? Landy, welcome, loud and clear. Great.
Great.
We're going to wait a few minutes to get everyone in. It's 12 o'clock by our clock. And we'll see. I think it's just you guys so far. We're expecting a really small group. But the fact that we have you guys means that we'll be asking all sorts of questions and going interactive. So make sure you stay to the end so we can make this sort of a real experience for everyone who is involved. It's a holiday?
No. Oh, we didn't know that. Oh, gosh.
We got caught again.
Yeah, we didn't know. What holiday is it, Al? You didn't realize that. It's a holiday here in Jamaica on Monday, but we didn't know it was a holiday. Crap. We're in trouble.
Actually, I'm going to move the screen over here so we can look at them directly. And
the Trinis are not going to show up.
So no Trini is showing up today. Didn't realize that. First People's
Day. Which one is that one?
Is that a new holiday? Oh, it's for Taino and... Okay, for Taino and Carib and... Wow. Because we don't have that we don't have it in Jamaica, so sure. Anywhere else in the Caribbean, I don't think Barbados has that particular holiday.
Okay.
Interesting.
So everybody must be at the beach. Okay.
As opposed to listening to us. Didn't realize that one. That one caught us unawares. As vacations or holidays in Trinidad often catch us by surprise, right?
Right.
Okay,
well, let's get started. Bikini, did you know there was a holiday in Trinidad? Because I know you're in Canada. I can hear you.
Oh, hi, Hyacinth.
Oh, hi, Hyacinth. Oh, okay, yep, you knew. Okay, I guess we're at it. Hi, Hyacinth guy. How are you? Good. Good to see you.
Okay, we're going to get started. I'm going to flip over to the presentation, and I'm going to hope that you can see the first slide. Are you sure you want to start the presentation? Yes, please start the presentation. And then I'm going to turn off the video for now until we take some questions.
If you lose us at any point, just type in because we're not going to know because we've gone over to video for bandwidth reasons. I mean, audio for bandwidth reasons. Okay, so let's get going.
Great. So the top 3 obstacles Jamaicans actually face when moving to work in Trinidad. And welcome. So let's jump right in. As you know, this is based on a special report that we've just produced, or, well, you'll hear some details about it soon. The project initially was called Jamaican Professional in Trinidad. And it's really written for Jamaicans who are thinking about moving to Trinidad. And we have at least 2 Trinis and maybe even a third, which is interesting because when we lived in Trinidad, and we lived there for a couple of years, we got all sorts of questions around people thinking about moving to live in Trinidad. And is what they're hearing about actually the truth? Is it true that Trinis don't like Jamaicans? Is it true that they wouldn't be able to get in? What is it like to make the transition to live in Trinidad? And if you're a Jamaican, why should you have Trinidad on your radar any at all? Because pretty much Jamaicans don't focus on Trinidad when thinking about migrating. They focus on the UK, Canada, the US, but Trinidad is not a country that we think of when we're migrating. Well, there's lots of reasons why Jamaicans do think about moving to Trinidad. So in terms of Trinidad's GDP growth, the compared to what's been happening in Jamaica, which is in the blue, Trinidad represents the land of opportunity. Way more growth in terms of GDP, which translates to way more opportunity. And these are the kind of numbers you wish you would see all the time in the US or UK or other places that Jamaicans migrate to. Typically, they don't pull up a map or a graph like this of Trinidad and say, what's happening with the GDP in Trinidad and should I go there? The few who are in the know that Trinidad offers a huge opportunity. And there in the graph, you see Trinidad's growth, GDP growth compared to Jamaica's. So it's been higher than Jamaica's for quite some time, considerably higher until recently. But this is the real winner, the GDP per capita. So Trinidad's GDP per capita is approximately 3 times, sometimes 4 times that of Jamaica, which means that there's way more wealth per citizen, per resident, or GDP per capita in Jamaica has been extremely flat, as you can tell. So a move to Trinidad, for example, up to 2008, when it was really, really high, right before the recession, was almost up to 20,000 a year. It's down to 15 because of the recent changes, but Trinidad was seen as a very hot destination for Jamaicans interested in moving and bettering themselves in any which way they could. But if you're a Jamaican, you would have heard a few things, which from our point of view, when we were living in Jamaica, it was basically the outbreak of what became the travel feud. And it came as a result of Jamaicans being exited either from Trinidad or being denied entry. And this particular excerpt on the right was a list of Jamaicans who were blacked by Trinidad immigrations. And it grew to a crescendo up until last year. And then it was a number of measures that were put in place, and it's no longer been an issue. Partly because we think also the number of Jamaicans looking to move to Trinidad has dropped.
Because of the recession and there's lack of jobs.
Right. So Trinidad's economy, as you probably know, has entered a recession for the last few years, and it's based on oil and natural gas prices worldwide. So Jamaicans have become wary in a way that was new to us in the last 4 years about moving to Trinidad. There was this sort of sentiment that grew that never was there before. And they would ask us, is this for real? As this particular contributor to the Gleaner put it, when he visits Trinidad, some people ask him, boy, I don't know how you're surviving in Jamaica, because them people, and you still have your accent, boy, how do you put up with it? And then when he's home in Jamaica, Jamaicans ask him, well, tell me the honest truth. Trinidaders don't really like us, right? So there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings that have taken place between citizens of both countries. And they've created a lot of mischief. It led us to start to ask and answer questions for our friends and decide to launch this particular effort. Because as far as we could tell, they weren't coming from a good place. They were coming from, the comments in the public were coming from politicians who were looking for diplomatic advantage, newspapers which just wanted to develop some juicy headlines,
right,
business owners who wanted to get their products in one country or another and found themselves not being able to compete, by disgruntled Jamaicans and Trinidadians who had an axe to grind. But we want to actually ask you for a minute, who have you heard some of these comments from with respect to what's happening in the other country?
Or have you heard any comments, negative or positives?
So if you could type your answer in the chat, I'll type up the answer. I hit the wrong button, sorry. Who have you heard comments from? Any typing just yet? Negative comments from? Who have you heard negative comments from? with respect to the other country? Go ahead and type that in the chat. I know there's also the odd friend who has traveled, right?
Yeah.
Who has traveled to the other country.
Or have you heard any negative comments? Maybe you haven't.
And they come back with one horror story, right? That gets repeated. And then it gets said over and over again. And it becomes a gospel truth just because no one else has provided any counter stories. So hearing the one story becomes the only story. Yep, McKinney says, from random travelers who go back and forth and pick up a bit of something and say, yeah, man. Al says the media, right? The media has been deadly. Hyacinth has heard nothing on the ground in Trinidad. Hyacinth, I imagine, about Jamaicans at all. Christian, welcome, Christian. Hasn't heard any negative comments from anyone who has actually traveled to Trinidad. So a lot of comments that you hear are from the media,
right,
and from people. We hear these a lot. People who have not traveled.
Right. People who are complaining the most, or the media people in Jamaica who were writing the stories. When you met them and you asked them, so what happened when you were in Trinidad? A lot of them have not even been on a plane to Trinidad. So whenever we're hearing the sentiments, we always ask, what happened when you land? So I think your guy's all right. It's the media that's pushing this.
Right.
Yeah.
And the uninformed person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a Jamaican thinking about Trinidad, are you making a mistake by even putting it on your radar? Should you write off the possibility of making a move, especially when there's a recession going on right now? Has it always been true that you shouldn't go? And is it just true or no? And the fact is, most people just simply surrender. They give up. They hear what they hear. It comes at them, especially in the last 5 years, with such a velocity and a ferocity and an anger and vitriol here in Jamaica, that a Jamaican thinking about Trinidad just gives up. Even though it's far easier to travel to Trinidad, and as we'll show in a minute, it's easier to get work in Trinidad. But most people simply just don't even bother to consider it. They don't necessarily become anti-Trinidad, but they stop dreaming of ever going. So I'd love for you to share a bit of your story. I know we have at least one Jamaican here who actually made the trip.
Who's that?
Christian. And what's it been like as you talk to people who have moved from one country to the other, as they were considering it, or as they were going through the change, or as they finally settled? So what kind of facts have you gotten from people who have made the move, or what was it like for you?
Is Christian still in Jamaica, in Trinidad now, or he's back in Jamaica?
He's back in Jamaica.
Okay. He was with Dive. Okay.
So let's see, what's your experience? Type the question in the chat. It takes a moment to... I'm not sure why it's doing this. I guess I can't type up there. I need to type down here. Right. So Christian is right on the money. Moving anywhere in the world is a stressful thing. And there's something that we're going to be talking about later, which has to do with our failure to adjust to any new culture. So what has your experience been? And Christian spent a few years, I think, in Trinidad, and I think you're saying it's been it was an experience of ups and downs. Much like any move to any country, I imagine. 2 years in Trinidad, great. Anyone else? What has your experience been? Or what have you heard from people who have moved back and forth? So Christian, you're a recent returnee.
He came in when we came.
Actually, the same time we came back.
Right.
Interesting. Anyone else? Let's see. Right. So Alice saying it's not the best time to look for work in Trinidad. We're going to talk about the sensitivities that exist around external entry. Hi, Maxine.
Attends.
Welcome. The question that we're asking now is, what's your experience either moving from one country to the other, or what have you heard directly from people who have migrated from Jamaica to Trinidad, or even in the other way around? Is there anyone else? Takes a minute just to refresh. See, okay, if not, then we're going to go ahead. Oh, there's a couple. Christian said the major up was that the middle class was so wide, the economy felt much stronger there. So he's pointing to the GDP per capita, right. Big difference. And Maxine has just done a project with some Trinidadians who have moved to Trinidad. And the South American problem that they're more likely to be here. Oh, sorry, that was Al. I'm mixing up the comments. Right, so Al is referring to what we'll talk about a little bit about immigration from South America. Maxine said they have no regrets. The down Christian mentioned is immense work culture differences, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Great. Right on point. So let's move forward. So in the absence of data and in the presence of all of the stuff we were hearing, we decided to develop some facts of our own. And we did that by launching the study, the Jamaican Professional in Trinidad. And at the end of the webinar today, we'll show you how to download the report. It's actually going to be available next week because we are putting some final touches on it, but you'll be the very first to get it. But it's going to have all of the content that we are sharing today, a lot more than we're sharing today. And Maxine said the cultural adjustment and dealing with immigration was a challenge. Yes. So our story, which you've probably heard a little of so far, is that, so I'm a Jamaican and Dale is a Trinidadian. And we moved to Jamaica from the US in 2005. And ever since we met, we talked about, what would it be like to live in Trinidad for at least a few months, maybe a couple of years. And we kept putting it off and off and off and off and off. Until finally the recession in Jamaica had us go, we need to look for Trinidad. So we moved to Trinidad in 2014 and spent a couple of years. And we came back late last year. And you want to add anything to?
No, it's okay.
No. And then, so while we're there, we thought we knew quite a bit about Trinidad before getting there because I had been traveling there since the 90s, doing work on a regular basis. I made at least 100 trips and I worked but never stayed more than about 3 weeks at any given time. And that would have been during the summer when I took a vacation. And you want to share your story?
And I was born in Trinidad, but migrated when I was a child. So I left very young and would only go back occasionally for carnival. So I'd never been in Trinidad for more than 10 days in over 30 years. So I was always curious about moving back and what it would be like and, just learning my roots and all the things I loved as a kid. So it was a good time for us to go when we thought we could, do some more with framework in Trinidad than we were doing in Jamaica.
So that took us to Trinidad, and sure enough, we've made a few cultural transitions in our time, and a part of what we do in our business is to help expats transition to Jamaica. So we studied the area of cultural transition and work transition. So we thought we knew a thing or two, and of course, we thought we knew more than we did, right?
Right. We got shocked.
We got shocked. So, what shocked us? Well, we've distilled it in this presentation down to 3 obstacles that, let's call them distinctions. So the first one is separating denial, and this has to do with immigration, of entry from customer service and security. That's the first one we'll talk about. Second one, to separate discrimination from what turns out to be just an unfamiliar situation, one that we just didn't recognize or didn't know existed. And then the third one, is to separate disrespect, perceived disrespect, from what really is a fear of a loss of harmony. Okay, so that's what we're all about today, these 3 distinctions. So let's jump into the first one, okay? So the first one has to do with immigration. So is it true that Jamaicans are denied entry? The answer is yes. But our survey showed not so for the professionals. So here's what they said. So the majority said they had no difficulty whatsoever. And we've sort of got a heads up and figured this might be an issue around customer service as opposed to one that's based around the immigration itself. So we split the question sort of into two to say which ones are related to service attitudes versus which ones are not related to service attitudes. And you can see that or surveys of Jamaicans in Trinidad show that there was about a 10% difference. So 10% of the behavior was attributable to service attitudes. And only about a fifth or so said they experienced immigration difficulties that weren't related to service attitudes. And that's just attitudes. So it made us ask some more questions. Is the immigration officer in Piarco Airport delivering service at a level that is different from his counterpart in the rest of the civil service? And is that different from the rest of Trinidad? So we asked a broader question as well. Do you agree with the following? Attitudes of employees providing customer service in Trinidad is different from that of Jamaica. And yes, everybody agreed. Of course it is different. Were you surprised by the attitudes of employees providing? Yes. I was shocked. 83% agreed. And I often receive bad customer service, 76%. So the Jamaican coming into Trinidad was surprised and shocked by the general level of customer service. So it led us to think that what's happening at Piarco is a function of what the Jamaican experiences on a whole. It's just that it's the first point at which they're experiencing, so they're not used to it to some degree. So having sort of received the first set of results, we asked the question, are we just picking up a bias here? Is this just asking Jamaicans, are you the best in the world at something that we think we're already pretty good at? So if you ask a Jamaican, are we in the best at running? Of course we're the best. And Trindad is a distant second. Just the same way you may ask if Usain Bolt the fastest. So of course a Jamaican will always say that yes, we're the best. And if you ask, are you better than? Oh yes, doesn't matter who you ask, we're better than them. So there's an inherent Jamaican bias in all of the questions, all of the answers. We started to assume that there would be. And if you asked, are Jamaicans not being treated as well as they should be? Yes, of course, we're not treated properly. So we said, okay, we need to balance out this Jamaican bias somehow. And what we did is that we surveyed non-Jamaicans who had lived in Trinidad and Jamaica. Right. So we went to Trinidadians and Jamaica and people from other countries, right, and asked them a volley of questions in a separate survey. So wherever you see this diagram with the two ladies, the two women, is data that comes from that survey. So unfortunately, there were only 15 respondents. It was tough to find people because we sort of had a high barrier to their being a part of that survey. They had to have lived in both countries fairly recently and for long enough. So we couldn't get everyone who had exposure to both countries. So we only had 15 respondents. So there's a caveat here that this is not, the second set is not a large data set. The first data set of the Jamaicans was 48 people. This one only had 15. So when you're doing the comparison, you got to sort of weigh this fact and keep it in mind. So here's what they said, the non-Jamaicans. Attitudes of employees providing customer service in Trinidad is different. 80%. I often receive bad customer service, 93%. And as you may recall, that's actually higher than the Jamaican response. So I just went back to the Jamaicans, and for the Jamaicans, it's actually higher. So as far as non-Jamaicans, it's higher. I often receive bad customer service in Jamaica. Yes. More balanced, but still yes. So there's a huge sort of difference that emerges from our survey of both groups. between their perception of customer service in Jamaica versus Trinidad. Can't get to the exact point difference, but you can see that they are responding to something that they see as a universal issue. And these were Trinidadians as well, who, like
Have
I
lived
said,
in both places.
who had
Yeah.
it included Trinidadians as well as foreigners from
right.
other countries. So where does that come from? Well, we dug another level deeper to say, okay, there are some causes. So one of the causes that is mentioned a lot in Trinidad, and we mentioned in our report, is absenteeism. So as you may know, Trinidad has been close to full employment for a while. I mean, unemployment is increasing, but it's if you wanted a job, you could find a job at Massey or KFC, entry level job anyway. And this was from a video that is linked in our report. CEO of Massey, Massey Stores, which is their equivalent of Hilo, if you're a Jamaican, came out and said that the poor service that people had received in the last few days had to do with employees not showing up.
Right. Sandra wrote it. Yeah.
Right. And Sandra says poor work ethic. And yeah, that's exactly what he was pointing to. And he said, basically he said it wasn't my fault. What can we do about it? And many executives in Trinidad repeat the same concern, because no one that I know of has effectively found or advertised the fact that they have found a way to beat this particular problem of workers simply just not showing up. Hyacinth is saying lack of poor management, lack of engagement. If you view this video, you will get an idea that the poor CEO, he is speaking almost like a victim of the circumstances. And those of us who know a thing or two about management may disagree. But I recommend the video highly. It's really interesting. So absenteeism has an impact on service in immigration as well.
Marlon said some people just lazy. I don't know.
Could be. So there have been a number of times when people have complained openly on social media, and you probably have heard that if you've been in Trinidad, you know the complaints. And you get to PRCO, you arrive at immigration, and there's one person.
Or there's two people and 4 flights have just landed.
And there's 4 flights.
Yeah.
So the absenteeism also has an effect on that first experience a Jamaican has when they land. But more importantly, perhaps, it has an impact on the immigration officer who shows up to work. So imagine you're the only immigration officer, or you're one of 2 people, and you're facing a line of 300. Imagine what it's like to serve the 300. So you're already stressed. You're in pain because you are facing a long shift that shouldn't be as long as it is, and people are upset because they're now waiting a long time to enter. So you're already up against it. Again, continuing in this vein of what the immigration officer's job might be like. So you probably all are aware that Venezuela is undergoing some desperate times.
Yeah, I think Al alluded to it, that they have to watch with illegal people trying to get in. Yes, Al just said that, right?
And that has produced a certain level of pressure in Trinidad that Jamaicans arriving in Trinidad wouldn't have visibility to, because here in Jamaica, we don't quite catch the impact. That Venezuela is a short boat ride away from Trinidad. If Venezuela starts shedding refugees in the direction of Trinidad, the way it has refugees going into Colombia, there's going to be a huge problem on Trinidad's borders. Well, forget the borders. It's going to be a huge problem on the beaches, because there could be a sudden and unwanted influx of Venezuelans who are fleeing the hard life that they're experiencing in Venezuela. Many are coming and overstaying their welcome. They're staying longer than they should. Venezuela is a country with 30 million people. See, Jamaicans don't quite understand or appreciate that we need to take a flight to get from Jamaica to Trinidad. $500 US immediately. Compared to the challenge of managing the influx of Venezuelans, we are a very small problem for Trinidadian immigration compared to the bigger problem they have with Venezuelans. We also have no idea that Guyanese have been coming to Trinidad, and we saw a recent report that said that twice the number of people being deported, there were twice as many Guyanese as there were Jamaicans. Even though Guyana is a quarter of the population of Jamaica, there are twice as many Guyanese in Trinidad being deported. We don't have visibility to that either. We arrive and we actually believe that something is being directed towards us. And we don't live inside of the world of the immigration officer who is trying to prevent not just the influx of human trafficking and of refugees, of prostitutions. Prostitutes are coming in, thanks Al. And he's also worrying about the influx of elements that could be radicalized, because Trinidad has provided quite a number, 130 recruits, and maybe counting because this is old, to ISIS. And at some point, this 130, ISIS is disbanded, which is probably likely. They will have to return. So the point of pressure in Trinidad is going to be in the immigration hall. So a Jamaican walking into the immigration hall doesn't get the whole picture. Mm-hmm. A Jamaican professional would have to do a whole bunch of research to understand what exactly is happening when an immigration officer considers someone for entry. And then finally, one of the very big points that actually has a lot to do with customer service goes all the way back, as exemplified by a quote from Eric Williams, which is that tourism is tourism. And that's a popular saying that dates back to the 60s from the Black Power movement. And essentially, it says that tourism comes with a sort of a curse, which is that you end up having to serve people even when you may not want to. So Trinidad has been fortunate, of course, to not have to rely on tourism. Over only some 3 to 8%, depending on how you measure it, of Trinidad's GDP comes from tourism. In Jamaica, those numbers are 15% of our GDP come from tourism. 25% of the jobs are related to the tourist industry here in Jamaica. In Trinidad, it's really a small number. So the Jamaican coming and arriving to Piarco believes that, and if you've ever arrived in Montego Bay's airport, I don't know if this is still done because I haven't been there for a little bit of a while, but there's a group of singers and musicians playing music, offering drinks to incoming arrivals, and they're singing "Welcome to Jamaica." So it's a shock to someone who's never seen that before. I remember seeing it for the first time. Oh my God, this is like going to the extra mile. It's because Jamaica's immigration is really all about welcoming the tourist. Trinidad has not had to fashion its immigration in the same way, which is why when the problems between our governments were resolved regarding immigration, one of the agreements was that the Trinidadian immigration officer would receive customer service training, which has been a big part of our orientation in Jamaica. It's hard to imagine not treating our visitors in a way that's special.
Catch the laugh. Al, you just wrote "not yet." What specifically is not yet? The immigration officers weren't trained? Is that what you're alluding to? Can you expand on what you're talking about, please, so we all can follow? Hi, Sandra. We're reading what you just wrote there. And we'll mention that in a minute about the crime and the perception. But Al, I'm not sure what you mean by "not yet."
We'll go on, and then we'll pick up Al's comment as it comes in.
As he responds, yeah. You want to note on Sandra's as well.
So let me turn the question over to you guys. Having said what we've said, how should the entering Jamaican professional be prepared? What would you say to them if they said, I'm thinking of coming to Trinidad, what advice do you have? And I'm picking up Al's comment. Let me just type the question in and then pick up Al's comment. What are we being? Yes, we're still there. Are we? How should? Oh, it's actually up there already.
Marlon is chatting in Patois for us.
Marlon said, "Tell them can't come, man." Marlon brought his assistant from Jamaica. I bet she was wondering, what did you say to her to prepare for her coming to Jamaica? Al says we need to get customer service and tourism as a number one, and if that were to happen, it won't happen in the short term, unfortunately. And even if you tell a Jamaican that it's a work in progress, I think the Jamaican would understand, as opposed to having the shock that currently pertains when you arrive at PRCO and see these things happening. So Marlon says that he advised his assistant about the economic advantages, but yes, the people part you have to be mindful of. So he told her, I guess, both the pros and the cons in a way.
And I think it was Sandra mentioned something above that she felt that Jamaicans were being targeted. You went up to Sandra a little bit, go up. She felt that maybe the Jamaicans were being targeted a little bit more than the Guyanese, just because they thought Jamaicans were bringing crime. I'm not sure if our people felt that way because we were kind of catering more to the professionals.
Right. Actually, in the report, we sort of addressed that, which is that, yes, there are Jamaicans being turned back by the dozen. However, our reports show that the professionals don't have that experience.
Right.
That is, if you're there about business and you're obviously there about business, the chances of being turned away as a criminal are, according to what we've heard, very, very, very small. So there's a way to fashion yourself as you enter the country. So it is clear you have certain kinds of answers, you dress a particular way, you speak a particular way, you anticipate the answers to certain questions and are able to answer them properly.
Right. Al is saying something about be prepared by not being so sensitive, and you're absolutely right. But there are people coming in that sensitivity radar is just so high up, it's what gets them in trouble.
Right. So a Jamaican would naturally come into Trinidad expecting the worst, right? Mm-hmm. They would have read the stuff in the press, they would have heard the horror stories, and they walk up to immigration and say, "Send me back if you're bad." Right. If not in word, then in attitude. Yeah. And that doesn't work. All right. So Christian says there's been an improvement. Great. Hopefully it came from that training that they put in. And I think he's here sharing a story. We'll pick up Christian's story in just a minute. I'll return to PRCO. Takes a moment. The officer was quite rude. Yeah. So a family returning. Yeah. So Hyacinth is asking, did the survey only target Jamaican professionals? The answer is yes. It's for Jamaican professionals who are moving to Trinidad. So we surveyed Jamaican professionals in Trinidad, but we also surveyed non-Jamaican professionals. But that was only done to advise Jamaican professionals as to what the true story of the point is.
Hyacinth, it was because it was easier for us to find the Jamaican professionals, and we knew they would be online, and most people kind of knew each other or knew of others. While we kept meeting the security guards and some of the helpers and so forth, they were harder to kind of target, to include in what was going on. A lot of them just didn't want to give personal information. You know how that is.
Right.
You couldn't get a phone number. You couldn't get anything from them. Right. So we know they're there. And they're all hiding out in Arima and, St. Augustine and more in the east side. And some of them have even been moving to the south because they said they can get jobs in the south and nobody asks us any questions. But we couldn't actually get them to participate in the survey.
Wow. All right,
okay,
great.
Right.
So here's another sort of very blunt question that we get. Do Trinidadians hate Jamaicans? Just plain out and simple. Hear the accent and basically decide that this person needs to be treated differently. So we asked the question. Trinbagonians treat Jamaicans worse than other foreigners? And the answer was a mild, yeah, sort of. So then we asked, Trinbagonians treat Jamaicans better than our other foreigners? Yes, that was the opposite, because we asked the opposite question and sort of flipped it to see if the sentiment would change if we asked about better or worse. And well, there was a slight shift, as you can see, but not a huge shift. But here's what really sort of got to us. I personally experienced negative treatment toward me in Trinidad and Tobago. And that number was less than the numbers provided about worse treatment in general. So there seemed to be a gap between the personal experience and the perceived experience.
Right, because everybody's putting in that they got treated well. I think Christian had that bad experience, but overall he's saying he got treated well. But right. It was just by the immigration people. Sandra, we're seeing what you enter there about point of entry is always hard. And it's with any country. You land in the U.S., and everything they ask you, you tell them. You don't even give them any trouble. Whereas sometimes I've heard of people landing in Trinidad, and my neighbor for once is Jamaican, and he told me he hates Trinidadians. He went down there and they want to know how much money he has, and he don't need no money because he has a credit card. So you have this one person having a bad experience, and then he's spreading it to everybody in the neighborhood how terrible Trinis were to him. So
and we believe it has to do with how the questions are answered at immigration. That if you are well intended but slightly say something like, for example, no, I'm here to work, that opens up a can of worms that starts a whole conversation around authorization, residency, as opposed to I have a CSME certificate and I'm here for a meeting. There's a very different answer, and it could actually mean the very same thing from your point of view as a professional visiting Trinidad at the time.
And Christian, I hear what you're saying. I think the average Trinidadian that we met and we talked to, they're like, oh, Jamaica, look, the Jamaican people. Because, of course, they identified me as Jamaican with Francis. And, they were always like, yeah, I have a friend in Jamaica and I want to come to Jamaica. So I think the perception in Jamaica that Trinidadians don't like them, it's just false. I mean, and then when they land and they get that immigration person, they think, oh, my God, here it is terrible. But once they get to know you, get past that, you're okay. Yeah, you're saying exactly, right.
So we decided to explore this question of Trinidadians treating Jamaicans worse than other foreigners, and why was there a difference between that and people experiencing negative treatment themselves. And we think it has something to do with the timing of the survey, because we did it around the time when the trade disputes were very, very public, and the fact that people were being sent back in the dozens was very much in the news. So we think that when Jamaicans answered that first question, they were answering it for all Jamaicans. Definitely not for professionals and not for themselves, we believe. But let's see. So we asked the question of non-Jamaicans. So we said, well, is there some truth to this, that Trinbagonians treat Jamaicans worse than other foreigners? And look at the first answer. Basically, it's completely balanced, right? So then we said, okay, Trinbagonians treat Jamaicans better than other foreigners. Better. They said, oh, no, that's not the case. No. Definitely not singling out Jamaicans for better treatment. And then we went to the big question, do you receive negative treatment? And look at that. The person who comes to Trinidad, the non-Jamaican who comes to Trinidad, Trinidadians and non-Trinidadians, 20% agreed that they experienced negative treatment. So if you compare that to the Jamaican response on the third line, you see there's a 10% difference. So given all the difficulty that has happened in the press and all of the negative sentiments that has been developed in Jamaica, the only difference between a visitor from another country and a Jamaican is only this mild 10%. So it made us think there's something deeper going on that needs to be explained. And if a Jamaican understands it, they will understand what it's like to live in Trinidad and what they need to get accustomed to before they even leave Jamaica.
Right. You heard Marlon say something about he was bringing his assistant in and he told her everything that could possibly go wrong. So when she got there, she was aware of it. It sounds like that's what you did. I don't know if Marlon's still with us or not, but he wrote something similar. So whatever he told her prepared her. So I think if people are prepared, because we heard that from some of the people we spoke to and in our surveys, had they been aware of what they were coming into, they would at least be prepared and they were sensitized. So I think that's what, Marlon, if you're still there, you can either say yes or no, but I think that's what you did with your person. Yeah. Maxine, I'm seeing you're typing something about people respond differently to the U.S. than Trinidadian immigration officers. I would say, yes, I think so. I don't know why, if they're more afraid that they might get denied entry from the U.S. and they really don't want that to happen, or their people are waiting for them, or they just take the U.S. so much more seriously. Because even Jamaicans landing in the U.S. don't give any trouble. They just do whatever. What do you think?
There's also a practical difference, right? The Jamaican flying to Trinidad doesn't need a visa.
Right.
So most Jamaicans who apply for a visa get denied. So the weeding out happens on Old Hope Road at the U.S. Embassy. So most Jamaicans are denied. However, anyone can buy a ticket and jump on a plane and go to Trinidad, sorry. So the weeding out has to happen at Piarco, not when you buy the ticket. So there's a huge difference between the person who lands in the US and the person who lands in Piarco. So to prepare the Jamaican before they leave Jamaica and arrive in Trinidad, here's the question I want to ask us. Is the Jamaican in Trinidad a visitor? And I may have already tipped my hand in terms of giving some of the answer. But we asked the question, foreigners are treated with a greater welcome in Trinidad and Tobago than in Jamaica. And only 11% of Jamaicans said yes. 67% said, no, man, they treat us pretty much all the same. And then we asked the question of non-Jamaicans. Foreigners are treated with a greater welcome in Trinidad and Tobago than Jamaica. And again, disagreement that Jamaica treats its visitors differently than Trinidad. A far greater welcome. It makes sense because we're a tourist country. Oops, I'm hearing that there's no sound. Are you guys hearing us? Let me check to see. Is it only
Sandra?
Yes, you're hearing. Okay, Sandra, what you should do is refresh your browser.
Type it in. She can't hear you.
Oh, she can't hear me.
Hang on a minute. Let's just help Sandra here.
Refresh your browser.
Right, Sandra. Put Sandra.
Stop. My typing is terrible. Sandra. Or sometimes it needs a reboot. Because sometimes there are issues with the bandwidth. So there's a big difference with respect to how both groups perceived visitors to Trinidad being accepted by Trinidadians. So here's what it sort of boils down to. A Jamaican perceives a visitor as someone who is coming to enjoy the country as a visitor. They're economically important. And everyone knows that we treat them in a particular way. Trinidadians, however, most visitors are coming to do business. They're coming for economic reasons. So for us in Jamaica, a visitor is someone who you treat differently. However, for a Trinidadian, a visitor is someone who you don't treat differently. No, I wanna offer this up as a strength. Because one of the things I love about Trinidad is that as you meet someone, they immediately include you. So Trinidadians go to the extra mile to include you as if you had lived there all your life. You get invited to Limes, you get invited to fetes, you get invited to meetings. Sure, come meet me in my office. The hierarchy that we have in Jamaica around class and who can do what with whom in Trinidad is almost like there's an active sort of force within a Trinidadian culture to reduce that difference and to have all of us be the same. Now, unfortunately, for a visitor who comes in and expects special treatment or different treatment, that cuts both ways. By treating me as if I'm not special, I can easily interpret that as disrespect. And that's how many Jamaicans experience it.
Right. Al said that. It's about a respect thing. And Jamaicans, everything is about respect. I don't know where it came from, why it exists, but it's about respecting the person.
And how respect is experienced in each culture differently.
Right, right.
So a Jamaican landing expects it to show up a certain way.
Yeah.
A Trinidadian gives respect in a different way.
Right.
And then both sides are confused as
Right.
to why there's a conflict and why there's a dissonance. I'll say slow clap, Francis. That's it.
Right.
But it's what our surveys showed us. These are all our respondents.
Right.
So, and here's one of the ones that is so vivid and real. So, as you arrive, a Jamaican arrives at Piarco. He or she joins the CARICOM line, which is for both CARICOM people and Trinidadians.
Yeah.
And the line forms, and then the immigration officer comes up and says, anyone holding a Trinidadian passport? And anyone with a Trinidadian passport, follow me.
Right.
And they move to the front of the line. And as that happens,
the Jamaicans are wincing.
Jamaicans go crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it flies in the face of everything we know about how you treat an outsider. It is the first, before you even speak to anyone, already they're disrespecting me.
Right.
And frankly, we take it personally. Right. And we treat it as if it's wrong. But all it is, from a different point of view, is that we're all one. And when a Trinidadian immigration officer invites someone to the front, they're not saying that these people are better than you are. They're just giving preference to citizens. Citizens move through the line more quickly. So there's a whole nother reason to explain why the behavior takes place at Piarco, other than the one that it's a sign of instant disrespect.
Right. What they should do is have a line for Trinidadians only if they want to do that, the way the U.S. does. U.S. citizens only.
It would be more sensitive, right?
Right.
But let me ask you, so given what I just said, what are the pros and the cons of Jamaicans having this point of view that our visitors should be treated differently, as opposed to the Trinidadian point of view, which is that, nah, man, all of we is one. We treat everybody the same here. When you come, you just fall right in and you're included. Pros and cons of both. I'll type in the question. Whoa. Something's going on with the thing. What are the pros and cons? See if we can get some responses.
Keep talking.
It'll take a moment to refresh, so I'll keep on explaining. Just because we have about 10 minutes left. Already been pretty interactive. So each person sort of wants to be treated in a way that feels respectful to them. And we found the same thing with the Trinidadian executives who came to Jamaica. They thought that by engaging in pecan and by calling people by the first name, by making jokes, by meeting people outside of the office and being informal and casual, they thought that was a way of connecting with people. And they were shocked to discover that the Jamaicans were taking exception to it.
Right. The Jamaicans didn't like it at all. Right.
Felt disrespected by it and disconnected by it. Because for them, this is how we show our respect of each other. But it's not the way that Jamaicans do. And this distinction is one that I've never heard it drawn outside of the work that we've done in terms of the two surveys. Marlon said the struggle is amongst the lower income Jamaica, right? Who comes here because they're very sensitive, right? Okay. The professional would probably have traveled some more, right, and probably be aware of the cultural difference, right, and what culture shock looks like. That's Maxine says that. That's very, very, very true.
Right. Marlon said that the execs will cope because their IQ might be a little bit different. So the security guard and the construction worker will pull out a bottle and want to fight. Exactly. That's probably what's going on.
Right.
Yeah. But I was explaining to Maxine earlier, Marlon, it was harder for us to track the security guards and the helpers and the construction people to get them to participate. That would be a whole other survey and running them down. It was just hard to get them.
Right, especially if they were under the radar.
Right. They were under the radar and they didn't want. I had a couple of helpers say, boy, I want to be part of this, but Gil, I don't want nobody knowing because now I want them kick them out of the country. So, they couldn't be part of it, even if they wanted to be. Yeah, he just
the survey.
Under the right. Because I had one professional woman say, my helper really want to be part of it, but she now want to get on no computer. So yes, you're right.
Right. So these two very different orientations showed up in our studies, both studies, and it causes conflict and it causes problems. Al says that he's mediating between two colleagues. The Jamaican is very sensitive to the difference in culture, and the supervisor cannot imagine what he is doing wrong.
Right.
And he's even British, he's not even Trini.
Right. Oh, gosh.
So there needs to be this whole level of sensitivity. Usually it goes away. Like I can tell you, in our marriage, it's gone away because we've been married for 12 years?
13.
Plenty. 12 years.
Yes,
12.
Maxine, I agree with you. It would have to be a different approach. I would have to stand where they're working, go to the different, maybe ride the priority bus route, maybe places where they are to kind of verbal, exactly. Because if I was doing it verbally and I got our helper to turn me on to her helpers and the security guards, I know how to find them. It would be definitely offline. Yeah,
very
I agree with you.
Right.
And Marlon said it right. They are being taken advantage of because they're hiding out. And I've had nail girls tell me, Miss, we're making a whole heap of money and sending back to build my house. And them me not go back. Me not going back to Jamaica. So they are there and they're working. So story is reaching back to Jamaica that nobody likes them, but it's not true. Right.
Right. All right. So having talked about discrimination and denial at immigration, let's talk about disrespect. We've already talked about this just a little bit. So this turned up, as I mentioned, in our prior study, the Trinidadian executive in Jamaica. The executives reported to us that their employees told them that they were disrespecting them and they couldn't understand it because all they were doing was trying to be friendly or open or jokey or connected, and it had the opposite effect. So we asked some questions. Do you agree with the following statements? Employees in the Jamaican workplace are more respectful to their colleagues than their counterparts in Trinidad and Tobago. Overwhelming agreement from Jamaicans. So we asked the question of non-Jamaicans, and they said, well, they give a more of a balanced perspective. Not as skewed, but sort of agree, disagree. Yes, maybe it's more balanced in their point of view. But for the Jamaicans are more respectful and Trinidadians, and that's almost a 3-to-1 margin. It's a huge difference in respect, what we Jamaicans call respect. So we expanded that question even further and said, well, what are some of the behaviors that may be seen as disrespectful? Do you agree with the following? In Trinidad and Tobago, I often hear criticism that is delivered to me or others in the form of a joke. 72% Jamaicans agreed. And we asked the non-Jamaicans, and the number was even higher. 80%, 87%, right? Maxine says pecan and fatigue.
Right, which drives the average Jamaican nuts, right?
And the average Jamaican hears it.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
it's way more than just a method of giving feedback. It goes far deeper than that. It actually goes to some degree to trust. Because if you can't come and say something to my face, well, let's see. I trust my colleagues in Trinidad and Tobago more than I do my colleagues in Jamaica. Only 2% of Jamaicans said so. And for the non-Jamaicans, similar experience by a 2-to-1 margin. Only 20% agreed that they trusted their colleagues in Trinidad more than the ones in Jamaica. And we believe that's all related to culture, ways of giving feedback right. and ways of criticizing and picking. So we went another level and we said, does it have an impact on your perceived level of honesty? And we asked, do you agree? I've experienced greater individual dishonesty in Trinidad and Tobago than I did in Jamaica. 48% agreed of Jamaicans.
43.
43%, sorry. And among the non-Jamaicans, 77% agreed. Big numbers. So dishonesty, trust, are all some of the emotional feelings that we believe are a result of this indirect method of giving feedback. What Trinidadians use sort of as a joke and as a safety valve is seen by others, Jamaicans and foreigners, as somehow dishonest and distrustful.
McKinney, so I saw you write down about the old talk and kicks, and I agree with you. And I didn't know until I went back to Trinidad we were there for 2 years, where all my chatter and old talk came from. I didn't even know I had it going on until I went back there. So when I come back to Jamaica and I do it, I now see Jamaicans don't like all that old talk and jokey the way we Trinis like it. And it made me understand me so much better, because when I was in Trinidad, everybody was doing it. So you are right. There's old talk and kicks. And you're right, Maxine, about it drives the Trinis nuts. The Trinis are like, why are the Jamaicans so serious all the time? Everything with them is serious. They won't fight about everything, the face makeup. But it's just the way they are. Life is a serious thing in Jamaica, and they just don't joke around the way the Trinis joke around.
Right.
And
right.
then, go on.
So why? It all comes down to a preference in the way of confronting issues. Jamaicans want that direct, truthful confrontation, and Trinis don't.
Right.
Trinis prefer to have it be sort of sideways, sort of indirect, sort of maybe you'll catch the hint, and to use jokes. And this is not an accident. Why it happens. And we ask the question directly. Tell us about confrontation. Finally, Jamaicans are more willing to confront difficult workplace issues than their Trinidadian counterparts. And you can see the results for themselves. Jamaicans are more indirect than their criticism than Trinidadians. So we asked the opposite question to try and trick the few who weren't reading. Nope. Disagree. And outsiders, the non-Jamaicans, disagree even more. And finally, Jamaicans are more likely than Trinidadians to talk about someone behind their back. No, sir. No. So these behaviors around confrontation, if a Jamaican is aware that he's coming into, or he or she is coming into a situation where this difference is going to be manifest, they can be prepared and prepare themselves for what is going to be a shock to the system. Mm-hmm. Because we even get violent. And unfortunately, I have to, it's terrible to say, but we Jamaicans, we get violent when these things happen. We might hold it in for a long time, but when it comes out, it often comes out as an outburst.
Right.
Because there's a tremendous value that we place on being upfront and direct and not engaging in the practices that we're talking about here. But here's a big question. And this, I mentioned the word harmony at the very beginning. Why? Why does pecan and fatigue and old talk and kicks, why does it even exist in the first place?
Right.
And as an outsider, I would say Jamaicans underestimate the diversity of Trinidad. And when I say diversity, you know what I'm talking about probably. The racial diversity, ethnic, national, religious, class. There's a number of different facets at play that we just don't have here in Jamaica. And compared to Guyana, Trinidad has had a minimum of racial issues that have turned into conflict. Conflict as in violence, as in people dying. So Trinidadians have, or my interpretation, found a way to
coexist,
work out differences.
Mm-hmm.
And one way is not to confront issues directly or get up into other people's faces, because the repercussions of doing that over and over again can be so dire. So the indirect approach has become the preferred approach as opposed to direct approach. So we've coached executives, people at all levels in Trinidad, about using direct approaches that tend to work better than indirect approaches if done skillfully. And I can tell you, it's a very big difference from doing the training that we do in Trinidad versus Jamaica. Mm-hmm. And the difference all has to do with a willingness, sort of a deep-rooted, sort of a sense of what's safe to do and what's not safe to do. That gets translated into pecan and fatigue and indirect methods, which unfortunately gets translated into trust and dishonesty and criticism. And then the impact on the Jamaican who comes in unawares that that's really what's going on. So, we've actually exceeded our allotted time.
It's supposed to be an hour. We've gone over a little bit.
So if you could bear with us for what we're going to take questions. So don't worry, we're definitely going to take them. But we're going to point you in the direction of the downloads that are yours if you're interested in delving into these questions in more detail. The Trinidad Executive in Jamaica was our study done in 2006. It's available as a free download at the following URL, the one that's on the screen. I wish I could just copy and paste that in, but and then the report, the Jamaican Professional in Trinidad, we are putting the final touches on. It will be available next week. If you go to that URL right now, you can sign in and get. We'll put you on the list, and you'll get a copy as soon as it's complete. So we'll take questions and comments, and we'd love to hear what you've been so engaged so far. We haven't even addressed the comments that came in just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I saw one there that Maxine wrote about, but even some Trinis do not admit that they don't like the pecan. That part I didn't know about. I just felt like everybody was doing it, and you go to a party and that's all they do for an hour, just joke and badmouth each other and bring up things that happened 10 years ago. And I would say, wait, did this happen last week or 10 years ago? And then they would just so it was constant jokes, and it's okay, but it's good to know that it drives some Trinis nuts. I didn't realize that. So thanks for sharing that part. As a Jamaican, Sharon says, as a Jamaican, I always prefer the direct approach. Time and time again. Yes, I agree with you, Sharon. It's how it's done here. But, somebody wrote that we have to accept each other's cultural differences and likes and dislikes. But I think in order to accept, we first need to recognize what's going on. And this conversation, we're hoping, is one of the many beginning conversations, because we understand both cultures and what's going on. Because you have to dig below the surface to understand what's really going on. Maxine, Dale, I picked up in a workplace civility research that I did. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Great. If you could share that with us, we'd love to, because we're in learning mode with respect to what we shared. The two URLs I shared are just the long version of the ones that are on the screen. One is for the one report and the other is for the other. McKinney says, I believe people engage in a lot of idle chatter. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Social media hype will make things worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Asking about roti. Yeah. The truth is, you go to Trinidad, you hear reggae music all the time. You come to Jamaica, everybody want roti, everybody want to party when it comes to carnival time. We love each other's cultures.
Yeah.
That is the fact. It's just that something has crept in the last 5 or so years. And I think you may say it's because of a lack of exposure. Mm-hmm. So hopefully our report will make up for the lack of direct exposure that we really need to have with each other. That was really the long-term solution. It's just that the geography and the cost of travel sort of beats us.
Because in the end, we really do have a lot more in common than we have than say somebody from the UK or somebody from the US.
Yeah.
And I personally find that I hate maybe it's because my husband is Jamaican, but I find that Trinidadian Jamaican mix sometimes works well, because you have one person being serious and one person playing all the time. McKinney, I don't know if that goes on in your household, but when Francis is being too serious, I say, boy, leave me alone. And we kind of go on and on. But yeah, we need to have more open conversations. I agree, Sandra, because people just don't understand. We just don't understand each other unless we pay attention to what's going on. We're going to go back up and look at some of the comments and maybe speak to them a little bit. You're going too fast.
Respect each other, cultural differences.
Yeah, that's true.
Got to be mature to accept them. Yeah.
Right. Maturity. And, you have managers showing up from Trinidad to Jamaica and not understanding the culture and getting into trouble. And you have the same thing, Jamaican managers showing up down in Trinidad. And we've known people who bolt jobs down there because they're like, they couldn't take all the playfulness. He was like, everything is planned, drinks. And he was a very serious Jamaican and he hadn't lived anyplace else. He just wasn't coping and just had to bowl back with his family. So it varies. Is there anything in particular that we didn't touch that you may want us to mention? If it is, you can type it into it. Hyacinth wrote, we shouldn't have to change each other. We just need to become aware of what drives us both. Yeah, and I think I mentioned that when I said it's a matter of understanding each other and keeping the conversations going. Marlon, what is your haha about? I'm not really sure.
The mix.
Huh?
Marlon says, I know of quite a few of the mix that work well.
Yeah.
He said that.
Oh, he's
Trinidad
right.
Jamaican connection.
Okay. The orientation and preparation necessary is what enter each other's space. Yes, that's really, and being aware. That's why we decided to do the research that we did. When we got here to Jamaica from the U.S., and Trini companies were coming to us, we realized there was a problem with Trinidadians who were coming into Jamaica. And that's why we started that research. And we're hoping for the same thing to happen because we meet Trinidadians that want to expand their businesses here in Jamaica and they have no idea of how to go about it. And the more they know about Jamaica, the better it can be. Or Jamaicans landing in Trinidad, it's the same thing. There's just too much kind of talk and stuff that's not really true and misconceptions going back and forth. Maxine, Francis, I'm the one who know
quite a few of the mix that work. We have the back and forth.
Okay.
Maxine also said the orientation and preparation necessary as we enter each other's space. Boy, so true. If it were only available. And Marlon has a joke. On the funny side, once in a bar, Trini man get real vexed because Trini girl is paying me more attention.
Marlon, are you the photographer, Marlon? I don't know. Are you the photographer, Marlon? Right? Yes, if you are.
Man, say go back home.
Oh, no. Okay,
No,
so
not.
you're not Marlon. Okay, it's another Marlon. Okay, well, thanks for sharing and leave the Trini women alone, Marlon.
Any other comments or questions or anything before we wrap up? It's now
we
about 11
appreciate
past.
you sharing. McKinney,
Really
thanks for
appreciate-
coming and sharing.
Oh, one important thing I didn't mention is that the recording looks like it's working. So it's going to be available. I'll send you the URL. It'll be available in about a couple hours. So you can share and spread this webinar with your friends and anybody who wants to see it and
Marlon, yes.
enjoy from it. Yes, Marlon. It should be available if there's no technological problems. Great. Thanks, Bikini and Sandra and Maxine. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, and
Great
spread
job.
the word. And we're going to try to go to as many people as possible and kind of share what we're doing and get people involved. And, that's what we're about. So thank you.
And we're going to sign up. This is the last small piece of video. Bye, guys. Take care. All the best.
Exactly, Sandra. Thank you.
That's right, Sandra. Oh, and then also, Andy, the non-professional may be on a 90-day visitor's pass and therefore spending too much time and overstaying their welcome.
Right. And, Al, when you wrote that, I was going to say, I know that's happening. They are coming and they're staying beyond the 90 days and they're hiding out. That's probably why they don't want to talk to anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Thanks, Marlon.
But the professionals in Jamaica needs to understand the difference.
Right.
And that they need to do their research,
Right.
frankly, and then be off it.
Right.
All right, guys, we're gone. Take care. All the best.
Send us email or anything. Are we gone? We're gone.